is the sacraments of marriage, sacraments, and here we have hello, Harsha, can you hear us? If if you don't say anything, that means that you hear. Welcome. And other okay. Two from Germany and another one from Poland. Will probably be there. Very good. In some way, you could say this. Another way of putting it is, what does it mean to get married in the church? That's a bit of tonight. And I bring this because otherwise, just to follow along, because there are many things that we discuss, and eventually, I will make a few questions in general. Feel free to give an answer or not, if you prefer, and then we make at the end a short break to ask questions. If you think it's necessary to ask questions in the meantime, do it. Maybe I say, well, if you wait a bit, the answers will come. And then we have a break after the class, and we have the ceremony of the blessing of the engagement in the chapel. And then we just come back and maybe we can take a picture at one, of course, in the chapel. That's it. And what I thought that we could do is eventually, in the first place, like first an introduction. What you could say. Because some people ask me, what are the most important things regarding marriage for people who want to marry in the church? And then what does it mean that marriage is a sacrament? And two key words that I think is very important for the whole preparation of your marriage is freedom and joy. Feel that inner freedom always, and that are when you have these two things, I would say things go well. And, sorry, did you eat anything?
Yeah, we ate something.
Because we have something for you later there, but
Thank you very much.
we just finished.
Sorry for interrupting.
You had said that you would arrive after. Okay. And then what the thing that I follow is, let's say, preparation, marriage celebration, and afterwards, from the point of view of, let's say, faith and religion. And then first, look at like a previous introduction. And it says this talk could be given by a married couple, because in the past, also a married couple gave this talk. But several times people said, well, we would have liked to listen to the priests about things of marriage. And then we began to give this talk. Because you could say a priest is, as you know, in the Catholic Church, it's called for celibacy, doesn't get married. And then what can a person who is not married say about marriage? But then if you take a look more closely, you say, first of all, that there are more things in common than you would say. For instance, that marriage is a vocation for life, and priesthood is also a vocation. It's a sacrament, priesthood. Marriage is also a sacrament. Something holy that God is there. It's a choice that you make for your life. Marriage and priesthood. And then the Lord helps each person to follow in that way that you've been chosen for. And also in my case, that's a bit of myself. And the first of 11 brothers and sisters. And my parents moved quite a bit. I was born in England, and another brother of mine was born in the US. And my other brothers and sisters were born in 5 different cities in Spain. So, and besides being born the children, we moved to other places. And then regarding my work here in the church, when I came here 24 years ago in this church, they asked me, "Do you take care of the marriage preparation?" And I began, and at that time there were not so many couples preparing for marriage, and to my surprise, I would say, since I started with those courses, first was a personal preparation, and then the numbers began to grow in such a way it was because I like to speak with people who get married here, and besides the classes, 5 or 6 times individually, when it wasn't possible. And since we have these courses, I think more than 1,500 couples come along. So if you would have told me this 25 years ago, impossible. But okay, I'm the first so far. And then, well, the first thing I would say is that congratulations with your upcoming marriage. And then the fact that you take part in this course is an indication that you want to prepare well. That's what I've seen. Is that people who come to these courses is a very strong selection, because not everybody has the same commitment that you have to marry well, and in what is marriage, you could say, is inviting Jesus to the wedding. That he is the witness of the love you have for one another. And some people ask me once in a while this, what is the most important thing for a good marriage? One of the things you've seen, because I've seen, besides the 1,500 couples that I've seen in courses, I think for as many couples already married to come to church and speak with them. And I think what I would say is the essential part is that there is mutual support. Of course, respect, but that you're able to support one another to become a little bit better. Because nobody's perfect, and it's also good that you realize that little by little that the person with whom you're going to marry is not perfect. You're not perfect, and the other is not perfect. And then, okay, how can we help one another to become a little bit better? With patience and kindness. When someone said that marriage is about 2 imperfect persons who don't give up on each other. Okay, that's another way of putting it. What is the most important characteristic of a person for a healthy marriage? And that applies for both, for the man and the woman. And that is, I would say, humility. Think of the other person first. Doesn't mean that you have to forget yourself completely, but mainly think of the other first and then yourself. In this book that you get, this Love, the Great Opportunity, I would say it's a book that's quite easy to read, because it's not difficult English, but it's very profound. Recently, I gave this book to a man who was 65 years old, who married for 40 years, and I liked it very much because it's very recognizable. What is a sacrament? That's marriage is a sacrament. You know what marriage is, more or less. But what is a sacrament? And does anyone have an idea how could you define a sacrament? What is a sacrament?
Good question.
Milestone. Somehow I feel like it's a milestone in your life.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Something that's bigger than normal
daily things. Okay. But just thinking of the word itself, sacramentum, sacrament. It's something that's sacred. It's something holy, and it has to do with God. But then there is a technical definition of marriage, or of the sacrament, and that is a sensible sign, something that you see with your senses in some way. You can see, you can touch, you can smell, you can hear. It's a sensible sign instituted by Jesus Christ to give us a specific grace. That's what a sacrament is. Something sensible and chosen by Christ to give us a special grace. But Jesus Christ didn't was not a teacher like this. Okay, boys and girls, I'm going to tell you 7 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then the apostles later came with the 7 sacraments that we have, and the most well-known sacrament is the sacrament of baptism. And then in each sacrament you have something material, something spiritual that gives meaning, chosen by Christ, and then a special grace. What is the material part of baptism? Anyone? An educated guess?
Water.
Exactly. Water is, and what is the meaning of water? Water is it cleans. It's also a source of life. But on the other side, too much water can kill. And in that sense, and the sacrament of baptism is dying to sin, be born to a new life, as children of God. And then baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so with others. That's going on to marriage. In marriage, it also has something visible, tangible, there's physical, something spiritual, and grace. What is the physical part of the sacrament of marriage?
Ring.
Okay. Cold.
I think also about the ring.
Other options? Yes. Okay, it has to do with that, but it's
After you marry.
that's it. That's the point.
What do you think?
The persons themselves, the man and the woman who marry are the material part. They're the ones who say yes or no. And this is, for instance, something that when you study a bit of history is, I mean, when I first read it and studied it, I was a bit surprised. Because, do you know when the Catholic Church decided that it was necessary to have a special form that it is now, that the minister of the church was present in the wedding? When that started, any idea when that was?
1617. 1617. 1600, 1700s?
In 1570. This after the division with Protestantism. Well, that means that during 1500 years, Christians could marry in the presence of witnesses. Okay. There's I accept you as my wife, I accept you as my husband, and then maybe without a lot of formula, just okay, we want to give ourselves to one another in marriage. And then they went to eventually to the parish priest. Well, by the way, we got married a few days ago at home with and the witnesses were the parents, other family members, and it was registered. But afterwards, when the division of Christianity came, then the church says, I don't know, we need to regulate it a bit more. This is how. And in some way, you could say that what is the difference between, you could say, the natural marriage as institution and the sacramental marriage. And what I would say is that there is no difference, but we could say if this was marriage is just two persons who give themselves to one another for the rest of our lives and open for children. And then what the marriage in the church is that we want to do it in the presence of God and inviting Jesus, like in Cana, to the wedding. And I already gave the answer. When did Jesus institute the sacrament of marriage? In Cana. This thing. Jesus was invited to a wedding. The funny thing is that Mary was invited to a wedding, and Jesus and his disciples. And they went there, and they just enjoyed the wedding. And Mary noticed that they were running out of wine, and he said to Jesus, Jesus, they don't have wine. And Jesus, after a bit of a little struggle, did it. And you know how many liters of wine he produced on that day? Yes, and I think it's about 6 recipients or 20 gallons each. That's about 700 liters. Once I've been in Kenya, I've seen the recipients that were used to it. Because I didn't understand how stone jars used for the purification of the Jews and huge, and very thick stone. And these things Jesus made the water turn into wine. And that's Jesus was there, and his presence blesses marriage. That's what Christian marriage is also meant to be. There is a passage in the book of Genesis that helps understand this. It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a suitable partner for him. When he brought her to the man said, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." That is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two of them become one body. And this is one of the aspects of the creation in the book of Genesis. And you see that when God creates things, every day said, and God saw that it was good. And when God had created man and woman, and the Bible says, and God saw that it was very good. And men and women have the same human nature, the same dignity as human person, but they're also different. And they were meant to being in a discussion, joining alone. And as you know, this thing, God had beautiful plans for Adam and Eve, but they committed the first sin of disobedience to God, and they were expelled from paradise. And something wrong. Probably is it one of the following tasks. Detail. And hello, Kasha. Okay. And, okay, maybe I can show you the rest of the people because at least that they see you. Okay, there. Okay. And the thing is, something broken in the relationship with God, and all the relationship between man and woman. It's not always so peaceful as it was meant to be. And marriage indicates submission for your life. As I said before, it is a true vocation. And I would dare to say that God chooses you to follow that path. So, and the Lord will help you. That's and I would say, let yourself be helped by God. And the book of theology says that marriage is meant to give an intimate communion of life and of love to the couple, so that they are no longer two, but one flesh. That was God's plan. I was once a good number of years ago in a conference in the south here in the Netherlands about marriage. Two lectures given by an Italian priest who had specialized in marriage, and the only thing I recall of the two conferences that he gave in Italian was the question that he put at the end. He said, well, of all the things you've heard about marriage, what do you think is the most important thing for you for the marriage? And then you can only write one word, and he gave each one of those big post-its, yellow stickers, and then you had a magic marker and one word. And I think I put love, but that was not the thing that he thought was most important. And then when everybody had written, and he pasted all of them on the blackboard, and I think maybe 80% were there, and only 3 guessed what was the main point that he wanted to stress, and that was in Italian is uno. That was 1. And what you meant by this is that, and you give an example, I liked it very much. That when you get married, usually you go into the wedding as 2 different persons. And you can do it in many different ways, but usually the groom goes with his mom eventually. That's the most traditional. And then the bride with her dad. But they go in as 2 different persons, and they go together as one. That's one of the beautiful moments of marriage. And let's say one thing is that, let's say that the dreams that God had for man and woman and for humanity, and we messed up, and as we see that sometimes we humans not always choose the best part. We are selfish and we make wrong choices. That's what we call sin, offending God and offending one another and also ourselves. And in this regard, I would say that it's just a little warning that I applied also to myself. Because at times we think, well, let's say we love each other so much that there's nothing will go wrong among us. I mean, everything will be fine in our lives. I think it's good to have this, let's say, starting point. But I think it's also wise to realize that anything that can happen to any couple can happen to you. And let's say, be faithful in marriage. I mean, if we're not careful, also as a priest, I mean, there are many opportunities not to be faithful to your own vocation. And then it's good to be aware. This is a bit also humility, what I said before. And what did Jesus Christ say about marriage? He didn't say much, but as the first thing is just being present in the wedding. Just said. And another time, Jesus was proposed a question, and the question you would say is not only a question of our times, but let's say 2,000 years ago it happened the same. And some Pharisees and doctors of the law approached him and said, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause whatsoever?" That means that it happened. Is it lawful? And he said in reply, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate." This is also in many wedding ceremonies, you will hear these words. A blessing after the key words of your engagement, of the vows that you make. The priest says these words, so God has joined, men must not separate. And but the fact is that Moses had allowed divorce to happen. And why was that? Jesus said, and because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. Because in that sense, this is what the Catholic Church tries to say. I mean, let's try to live in God's plan and this faithfulness for her. Jesus restores the original order. This divorce was not meant to be, but indeed it happens. But it's certainly not the. Let's say, I think nobody marries with the idea of divorce, and that's why the sacrament is something that you do together. You give to one another the sacrament, but also, Lord, help us, give us your grace to be able to fulfill our tasks as best as possible. And you could say in the church, you have two, besides the personal sacraments that we can all receive, there are two that are more social sacraments. One is marriage, and the other is priesthood, for that's what you are meant to do in the church. And a few months ago, I had a wedding of let's say, what you could say a quite modern couple. I mean, because she was Catholic and he was absolutely nothing. But they died, and they married in the church, and then they showed me the readings that they had chosen for the wedding, and they had chosen one that I would never have expected that they chose. And I have it here, because, and I asked them, how come that you chose this one? Because probably one of those very confronting texts of the New Testament, there was St. Paul, that when people begin to, you feel they get very uneasy on their chairs. And the thing is, people at times stop reading, but then you keep on reading, you read the whole thing, then you see it's more, let's say, balanced than what people think at the beginning. Is then Paul writes to wives and husbands, and he begins with these words: "Be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ." And he says this to both, so husband and wives, be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ. And then this is what many people don't like. Wives should be subordinate to their husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is head of his wife, just as Christ is head of the church, he himself the Savior of the body. As the church is subordinate to Christ, so wives should be subordinate to their husbands in everything. And then, could you say this in the 21st century? But then, keep on going. And then, he addresses the husbands. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her. I mean, he gave his life for her, to sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. I mean, be subordinate to one another in the presence of God. So also husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. In any case, each one of you should love his wife as himself, and the wife should respect her husband. I mean, just it's Ephesians chapter 3. You want to read it on your own? Because I think there's a lot of stuff here. Now it goes to the two key words that I said before. It's freedom and joy. And many of you have already written that document of declaration for ecclesiastical marriage. like a questionnaire with things that, and also a special intention that you have. So, to marry in the Catholic Church, and I think that the main question that is put to you there is, are you choosing freedom for marriage with your wife, your husband, your future wife or husband? Are you free to marry? And the answer has to be yes. We need to be free. To be able to love, you need to be free. And what does this mean? This, I can give you an example that when I was ordained a priest, and previous to the ordination, that you have first, in my case, it was first as a deacon, and a few weeks later it was as a priest. Usually it takes more time between deacon, but in our case, it was 3 weeks after. And then we had a talk given by every day, a little talk given by older priests like experience, and one of them said something that's okay, was a bit scary. And what he says is that this, regarding this freedom, this, of course, it's good to become a priest in the same way this. Of course, it's good to get married, something good and holy. But you need to feel free to receive the ordination at the very last minute, because it can happen that, okay, I'm not ready, it's a bit too much, and if you don't think it's okay, maybe you need a bit more time, because and he said that until the moment that the bishop puts his hands on the head for the ordination in silence, can always pull back. No problem. Feel free to do that. And I would say this to you who are really married, to the moment that you go to the altar and say, yes, I do. It's important, you need to have that inner freedom. Because just to give an example, I think, if you would, again, I hope it doesn't happen, but I know people who have had this. A few days before the wedding, I remember, just to give an example, and then a couple who would get married here in our church, and they would say they had done the course of marriage preparation, and he was Dutch and she North American, and I'm being very honest, but you will never know these persons that well. And I had always the impression that he was Catholic and she was Methodist. And that she was a very consequent Christian, was very committed to her faith. And he was a good guy, but I think, in my opinion, a bit childish. I don't typically the things that you know exactly. Of course, you always give the benefit of the doubt to people that there is something here that I don't quite grasp. And then we were preparing the wedding booklets for the wedding. And I've spoken several times with both of them. And one day, in the morning, she calls me and says, well, Father Raphael, I'm making my luggage and I'm going back. This, because she canceled of course, the invitations were already sent long before. And the reason in this case was that she noticed that, and she hadn't seen it before so clearly, but especially in the last weeks, was the mother of this boy was completely above family. And this young woman said, sorry, and of course, this is just an example, because I think in that case, that woman saw quite clearly that he's not completely free, and I don't feel comfortable in this situation.
What was the reason exactly that the mother was taking a little bit more to care of the son?
I mean, I think the boy himself was too much dependent on his mother.
Ah.
I mean, that for almost any decision, we need to, and I know other people, for instance, one of the sisters, I mean, a bond that's not normal. I mean, and if you see these things, I mean, I suppose all of you have gone through all this, but I'm giving an example that certain things you cannot deny that they exist, and it's better to stop in time than too late. Because okay, the Lord helps, but they're saying that the grace of God builds on nature, on things that work well. And then another thing is, well, this is freedom. There's very a deep freedom, and the second is a great joy. I mean, that's also that's good for any relationship. I mean, you have to be happy with one another, and feel comfortable, and really enjoy each other's presence, and have fun together. And you can say, if that's the case, and that's a very good sign. If you always have to be very careful what you say, that you cannot say what you think. That's, I mean, you cannot be happy. And now we go over to the celebration of marriage. Because marriage, as I said, is sacrament, something holy. It has to happen then in a sacred setting, usually in the church. And that's you could say, the most appropriate place to celebrate a wedding is, it's in the house of the Lord. But is it possible to do it in a garden, in a castle, on the beach? I mean, it is not forbidden to do it in other places, but you need permission from the local bishop to do it elsewhere. And I've done almost anything, all the things I mentioned. And at times I was a bit surprised because you had no choice, or people had a problem and you want to help them. One of the funniest weddings I've had in this regard, regarding location, was maybe 8 years ago, something like that. And the beginning was a bit strange because a couple whom I didn't know called me and said, could we come to speak to you? What is it about now? I prefer to say it in person. Okay, come. They came and we talked about it, and then the request was, well, could you please give us a blessing on that day? Because 1 month later, the people who came from our country, they would marry here, and but we cannot marry civilly because something went wrong with the papers. But we want to get married in the church, and our people had months ago already bought the tickets, and they're coming. And then please do something like that. We will marry later. At least you have to give us a blessing as if it was a wedding, but it's not a wedding. We will marry later. And then I said to them, oh, that's a bit strange, of course. And what you're asking me is the only thing I cannot do. And okay, but I thought about it. So we decided also with them, I had to follow the bishop in this situation. A marriage in the church without previous civil wedding, and it was not in a church because he was Catholic and she was Protestant, and he gave permission for everything. No, go ahead. And I said to them, well, because they would be able to get married in Canada a few days later or a week later, but and then when I went to the place of the wedding, I hadn't been there before. It was a community center somewhere in north of Amsterdam. And let's say a room like this, nicely put and clean, ladies and gentlemen. The funny thing is that everything was decorated, the walls with orange paper. Because in, I think in the late afternoon, the evening, this Oranje, I think it was a World Cup that the Netherlands played against another team, and then they had to wear everything, and then it's again, it's a mind. Okay. But the funny thing is, in the meantime, I have got to know a couple of better wonderful people. And the thing is that I knew a lot of people who were there in the wedding. And some of them had done parts of marriage preparation with the children who I hadn't met yet. And so over 2 or 3 children. And I knew persons of the choir, the director of the choir, there's a woman who I know very well. And then what I'm telling you this because it was a very beautiful wedding, because you notice the face of the people who were there. And and then the father of the bride, at the end, it was custom in their country, gave a blessing to the new couple. And thank God I had someone who translated what he said, because I wouldn't understand anything. But so, and I'm telling you this, that's of course the church is the most appropriate place, but more important is how you yourselves are prepared. And the personal commitment, because that is the soul, each person, each heart is much more important than any building. And another aspect is, for instance, faith. Because in some of your cases can happen, but okay, one is Catholic and the other is not. At times, one doesn't have any faith at all. And is it possible to marry the Catholic Church? Yes. With which requirements? Well, we already know very well, just this one man, one woman, just exclusivity for the rest of your lives, and open for children. And of course, in freedom. And of course, on the other side, I remember many years ago that walking on the streets, I met an older man whom I know very well, and his children were at that time preparing their marriage, and he said to me, he speaks always very direct, so some priests don't realize how important it is, and how important faith is for a relationship, especially for marriage. And just because I knew him well, and that he has written books also about marriage, and I kept it in my mind, and that's why I said to you, because the church allows to marry anyone, also a person without faith. But this doesn't mean that faith is not important. And the document that you have to sign previous to the church wedding, you need to say that you respect each other's freedom of choice, and that goes both ways. So the one who practices faith doesn't need to push the other one to become a believer, because only God can help us to really believe. But on the other way, is the non-believer has to support the other in living his or her faith. So, yes, that's what I said also before. The essential for us to support one another, and so to become a little bit better. And faith is really important for the long term. Some other aspects of the spiritual preparation marriage, and because it is a holy sacrament, we prepare ourselves well. First, the ceremony, but also saying it's good to, and especially when the priest is going to help you for the marriage itself, and try to have personal conversations, because I always think that the spiritual preparation is very important. How personally my choice is for the other person, because I really want to do it. And this book can help, as I said before, to say, read it and discuss it together. And this is a book I've experienced it myself. Once in a while I read a chapter or a few passages, and then you say, it always seems like if I hadn't read it before, because there are many details that I hadn't got the first reading. And part of the special preparation for marriage, I would say, is attending Mass together on Sundays, and especially Sundays. Because to marry in the church only because of tradition or families, that's not enough. It has to be a personal choice. And it is also good to evaluate the relationship. Am I ready for this lifelong commitment? And then also to say, maybe I've made mistakes in the past. But, can I learn from them? Because that's we Catholics have what we have the sacrament of confession. We can look at our life, and I'm not so happy of some of the things I've done in the past. I'm sorry that I did them. I can't change the past, but you can say to the Lord, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and eventually also asking forgiveness to other people. But this evaluation of conscience is good for also for the non-believers, I would say. And maybe a private talk with a priest or a good friend. And something that can help is what are the things of my character that can help me for marriage? Positive things. Good to know. And also, which are maybe the negative aspects of my personality that could be a difficulty for marriage? It's good to be aware of that. And eventually to speak about it again. What can we do to help one another and to be more committed to yourselves? So one time I heard this from a man who helped me during many weddings, and he already passed away. And he said once to me, have you noticed that the more committed the couple is, there is something like a spark that goes over into the whole congregation? Because I had seen it myself many times, but I like to hear it from somebody else because it's true. The marriage bonds before God is unbreakable. These are, let's say, those words that seem a bit, let's say, official. This indissolubility of marriage, and tells you that the marriage is indissoluble. Is that it's not a bit too much? But you could say you put it in good perspective. I would say it's even better. I mean, this is like a kind of protection for your marriage. It promises you to help you in your married life. And you have spoken about sex like part of the sacrament. In any case, sex is an important factor in marriage. And having sexual relationship is among Christians was intended for marriage and not merely as being in love with another person. But that's also the reason, as you know, that the church recommends is to avoid sexual intercourse before marriage. Most of you live together for a long time. I would like to invite you to think this, maybe getting closer to that date of the wedding, try to wait till after the wedding for the sexual intercourse. See that works, because you will see that I once heard a couple who had been living together for 16 years, had 4 daughters, and they got married. And a few months later, I met the husband in the street, and how did he go? And he told me that, well, Because indeed, I remember a good friend over there, someone, but you've been almost like married for so many years. Huh? What brings you now to get married in the church after 16 years? Huh? And I've had weddings, people married 22 years. I mean, living together 22 years. I mean, everything is possible. And then he said something that, why did I get married? Because we were not yet married. And to my surprise, I thought, and he said to me, actually, I didn't think there would be much difference between what we did before, but to be honest, I do notice a difference. In a way, it's also because God helps in ways that's difficult to express. It's the feeling of your heart is much more profound. And sexuality is such, I mean, when there is a complete gift to one another, it is the only thing that can happen is indeed the birth of a child, and that's the greatest gift that God can give to a couple. I would also invite you, because we have on Thursdays a course related to faith. And a few weeks ago, someone had questions about sexuality, and someone there says, "Have you read the encyclical letter Humanae Vitae?" This letter of the Pope Paul VI. It's 14 pages, a very short document about human sexuality, and that's the best philosophical and theological explanation of why. And this sexuality is, let's say, has two aspects. Let's say unity, the physical union between man and wife, and the procreative openness to life. That's why contraception is not the best for a healthy marriage. That's what the Pope explained very well. Also, there is a sentence in a book that I like very much. Marriages as a sacrament is a mutual consecration of the spouses in God's presence. Because you're the ones who give the sacrament to one another. Because even the non-Catholic participates in something because you give yourself. But on the other side, you remain different persons, but you don't belong to yourself anymore after saying yes in marriage. In a wedding, you have two moments that I think that the most beautiful, the most profound. I mean, the hundreds of weddings I've had myself, and every time is different. And you have two moments that are always very moving. And that is the marriage vows, the couple themselves. Just the words, but because every person is different. And then the second part is after the Seigneur vows. Afterwards, towards the end, there is the nuptial blessing. This a blessing given to the couple. And everybody is standing eventually, but you kneel, and the priest gives a special blessing. And those are, I think, probably the strongest moments of the celebration. Now the final part is what happens after the marriage has been celebrated. This is the sacrament. Something that can happen is that trouble comes your way. It's difficulties. And of any kind in the communication is that you may lose a bit of trust in the other person. In practical items, as finances or jobs. Imagine that you lose your job. It's a difficult moment. And first of all, I would say, do not be surprised that difficulties come along, because that's just part of life. There is no place that no marriage that has no trouble at all. It's an ordinary thing that little troubles may happen. And also because you're committed to each other and consecrated by God, you can solve anything together. And also I think very important, common solutions in marriage, and maybe you can close the door. If it's open. It's, it's, for instance, also regarding this, when I was being to be ordained, I got a bit afraid at certain moments, and I spoke with an older priest. And he said to me something that always helped me a lot. He said, well, first of all, it's logical to have a little fear. But then be sure that the Lord will help you have God's grace to help. And the second point, he said that you always have someone who can help you, or other people. And I think this applies also to this marriage. Trust the Lord, and also there will be people who want to help you and will help you. A very open question now is, what could you say? This is some keywords. Is what could be the greatest enemy of marriage?
Sorry, the what?
The greatest enemy of marriage.
Lies,
Okay. Other?
egoismo, I don't know how to say.
Yeah.
Lack of
Selfishness.
Lack of no communication.
Okay. It's, very good. But I think that maybe what covers most is egoism, and, selfishness, being self-centered, and then that's usually the most difficult one. Thinking that we're the best. Of course, I'm the most important of the two. I'm more important. And this, I'm always right, of course. She is always wrong, or he is always thinking like this, just taking things for granted, and getting used to one another. And little by little, maybe because work is very intense, but living apart together. And I would say when yelling at each other, long silences, letting time go by and having no sexual intercourse. Things. When these things begin to happen, don't let them go. I would say you need to react. And usually, if we're honest with ourselves, why does this happen? Because I'm too much centered on myself, and I forget think more of the others. And maybe you just need to rest, because at times it happens. I knew several cases that one or two has trouble sleeping, and maybe during 5 days you barely sleep. Of course, you're not yourself. And then you need to tackle that problem first. Sleep, eat well, and now let's speak about 3 days later. We should speak, but not for now. And then another question, or now a more positive question, is what would you say is the greatest friend of a good love in marriage? The greatest friend of marriage, what could that be?
Trust. Trust.
Okay, other things?
Giving.
Okay,
Respect.
okay. Okay, and all these things are correct, but I mean, in the same way that egoism is more or less a common factor of many of the mistakes that we can make. And what I was thinking, in the best friend of a good marriage, of a healthy marriage, is taking care of little things. Don't wait for big things to happen. Little things, small attentions, to show your love for the other person with little things, maybe daily things. But I once heard an example of a married couple that that, I mean, I never heard a better one. And that is that they're both dead already. The lady just died a year and a half ago. But then the husband had been professor at the university, and he had written one book about the human heart and the capacity of love. The person was a philosopher. A very profound book, and his wife helped him to edit some of the books, and then when the husband had died, and she received some of the students of her husband, because she knew some of them, and once she received the visit of a young bride, someone who had been married a few weeks before, and she came to visit, and she was still in the honeymoon mode or something, very happy. And then one day, talking about all kinds of things, and the young woman said to the older lady, "You know something, that you really love someone, you don't make fuss about small things." And then they kept talking about things, but when they went to say goodbye, the older lady said to her, "And you said this or something, and if you don't mind, I can honestly tell you that I do not agree with that." And she said, because little things, what she says, can be an expression of a great love for someone. And she gave an example of her own life. And because when we got married many years before, and you could say the relationship between men and women was different than it is now. Because, she saw that after a few weeks living together, that he had a custom that she didn't like. And that is a very simple thing, that in those days, you didn't have showers like we have today. You walk in, that wasn't. The only thing you had in the bathroom was a bathtub, and everything happened in the bathroom. And then what he did is, taking a shower, he just left a piece of soap in the bathtub, not on the place where the soap is, but just there on the floor. And you know what happens? All the water comes around, and then when the wife came, the underneath part is like gel. It's very bit disgusting to pick it up, and you waste a lot of soap. And then she had to tell him, and she was afraid, but she said this to him, and more or less like I just said it. And then this woman said to the younger woman, you know something, that I didn't have to repeat it again. It never again did it. And when we had children, he was the one who taught our children to put the stove on the right place. And the thing is, everything had been so normal that she had forgotten it. Only after her husband had passed away, when she saw a piece of soap, she remembered that. And then the expression of the great love of someone, just in little things. And okay, and I think in all families you will have this. Something, you know, she doesn't like this, don't do it. So, or he doesn't. And okay. I've always wondered at times, imagine that man was so distracted that he kept on forgetting a piece of soap. And then you have to have another approach. Because people don't change overnight. And maybe you need a bit more patience, like you said, so can also happen. And another aspect, you will hear things about children, but there will be a source of joy, and also give a lot of work. But I leave that to the couple who will speak about that. But something, what to do if children do not come? what do we do? And first of all, I would say, do not get scared, and do not get impatient, because we're saying part of the time in which we live is that so much stress and running from one place to another makes it difficult, and this is maybe something to speak more personally in this way, and eventually it is IVF is not something that's the church recommends, and the church indicates now maybe parents of children who can be adopted. For instance, I know a Dutch couple, very young, very healthy, both of them, and they couldn't have children, and they were very sad about it, and they began a process of adoption, and it takes 4 or 5 years before. I mean, it's a very long process, at least in this country. And then when they had already gotten intent to go to a far country to have a child, and it was we don't care if it's a disabled child, don't worry. That was a disabled child, and then just before then she got pregnant in the normal way. Now they have 4 children, 3 of their own, and this adopted child. Okay, the Lord surprises us in many ways. Another little chapter is support of other families, and I'd say it's good that you try to have common friends, say that you don't close your marriage within yourselves or in your family, and try to share it with others, because you can learn from many people, and people also will learn from you to enjoy the beautiful things of family life. Also, it can happen that, let's say, maybe some friends that you may have had, once you get married, do not have a positive influence in your marriage. And then, if that is the case, how you do it, that's your choice, but you have to let them go. If that happens, that some friends do not give a positive energy for the new love that you've chosen, because don't search for trouble, because some people are quite negative, and maybe they don't realize it. And maybe it's good to have a conversation with them, let them know, well, if you don't change, and that's not, because in the same way we respect other people, you also need people who respect you and your own choices. And something that they have here in the Orthodox Church that I didn't know, that we don't have that in the Catholic Church. You have witnesses, you have a best man or whatever, the bride of honor, things like that. These are good friends, but the Orthodox have a real godparents for marriage. And that is a couple who is not a family member, but whom they trust, and they can share all kinds of things, and maybe not officially, but you may have in your surroundings a couple of we would like to be like a married couple, like those, united together, and then maybe it's an idea just to share certain things with them, and if you have questions, share with someone. And I think it's not necessary, but we say it towards the end. Because at times you think, well, if we give God a lot of importance in our life, then we don't have life on our own. I think that's not the case, because God always wants the best for us in that sense. And certainly in marriage, because God always unites the married couple. God never separates two people who really give themselves to the other. And I would like to finish with words that that I once read from Pope Francis. It was in a meeting, an informal meeting with families. I think it was in Ireland. And he said this: I'm very fond of dreams in families. Just dream. For 9 months, every mother and father dream about their baby. Am I right? They dream about what kind of child he or she will be. You can't have a family without dreams. And I would say marriage should have common dreams together. We heard something like that in the previous session. Once a family loses the ability to dream, children do not grow. Love doesn't grow. Life shrivels up and dies. Yes, you can call it otherwise, but like that, a plan for those dreams together. Have a goal that's aiming high. So I ask you each evening when you make your examination of conscience to ask yourselves this question. Today, did I dream about my children's future? Today, did I dream about the love of my husband or my wife? Did I dream about my parents and grandparents who have gone before me? There are times there's also something that I say to myself and I pray for that, a bit jokingly, but also serious. I ask the Lord, give me what I call the holy Alzheimer. And that means to forget the negative things that happen in life. If we don't forget them, try to keep the nice things that happen. Okay, don't forget them, but the negative ones, let them go, because otherwise we may be stuck in the past, and you are called also for eternity. In some way, you could say that a Christian marriage is meant, okay, to live together, a nice and meaningful life together, and then possible to get to heaven, to get to eternal life. And that's it. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The grace and the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ, who loved us and gave himself for us, be with you all. We know that all of us need God's blessing at all times, but at the time of their engagement to be married, Christians feel a particular need of grace to prepare themselves to perform a new family. And this is what we have to do about. We have to, in this time of preparation for the wedding. It's not only the day of the wedding, but it's your whole life from now on. And I read the first part, that's I think it's done the only presentation also quoted. Love is patience, love is kind. It is not jealous. Love is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interests. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. If you count these characteristics of love that Paul says here, it's 11. So many that it's difficult to remind them all. But the first two are quite easy to remember. And I always thought it's quite surprising that the first characteristic is love is patient. And the second, love is kind. And then maybe something that can help us to consider is the following word. Is that when you get angry at someone, especially with someone you really love and you care about, you ask yourselves, why did I react in that way? Many times, I think in this perspective, you could say, if I would love that person a bit more, I would have been more patient. And if I would have loved that person a bit more, I would have been kinder. Maybe it's true what I have to say. The point that you can say things in different ways. And my parents, a couple, I also knew only a little bit, but no. So, you know this story is that was my father was a Navy officer in Spain, and he worked in different countries, and one of his colleagues, he was from the military, was in the Navy, and then he went over to the politics of his country. And very successful, and things went well. A very nice marriage, they had several children, and they were already some married, and all of them living outside of the home. And what I'm telling you now happened when it was the 33rd anniversary of the wedding. And it was a very good marriage, but maybe because of his military upbringing, he was always very punctual. And his wife was not. And regularly, especially when he had an important appointment, like politics, and it was very difficult to leave on time and to arrive on time. And once in a while he got upset, and they had words about it. So, but one of the things that they used to do is that when they had the wedding anniversary, he used to bring a present to his wife. Not always an expensive one, but well thought of. She always liked it very much. And one day it was the 35th anniversary, and he thought a very special present. Something in that shop, but things went wrong in his work, and he went to the shop and was closed. And there was no way. He tried everything. It was not possible. And the only thing that he had was a card. It's an anniversary card. And then he thought, what can I do? And then he wrote something. He said, "Dear Mary, this year my present will be not a material present, but a spiritual present. And as you know, we have our words once in a while regarding functionality. I promise you this year that I will not argue about it. Your loving husbands and Peter. No? And then the thing is, a few years later, when I met them, and the wife told me this story, and she said the following: "Said, you know something? This was the best present I ever got from them. Best present." And the thing is, because he actually kept his word, and the thing is, I became much better myself. Because what I thought, that's why I say this, saying things in the right way, which is in this case with kindness, and has helped much more than maybe 20 years of arguments. And think of it, again, Lord helps me to realize that first growing love, because everything disappears. Because the only thing that we will be able to take with our life is how we love others and we love God, and the love we have received. And these two characteristics, help me to be patient and kind. There is a book called The Hidden Power of Kindness that I once got from. The first time that I saw it, a book of about 200 pages. When I started reading, I said, well, probably after 20 pages, the author will repeat the same idea over and over and over again, maybe in different aspects. But it was not the case. It was really a very good book. And then The Hidden Power of Kindness, and then the subtitle was For those who want to change the world, one act at a time. And then the main idea of the book is if you are kind with people, even people who are not kind with you, that will change. And in the course of history and of the person, and I think something to pray for. And this is these two characteristics of kindness and patience. I wish for you and for your marriage, not only this kind of preparation. Now we have this short intercessions. I will read it first, and then starting by there we go. As far as it goes. God our Father has loved so loved us in Christ. He makes us his children and witnesses to his love before the entire land. Let us therefore call upon him in all confidence, saying, Lord, help us to our Father.
God our Father, you will that your true children, brothers and sisters in Christ, should be known by their love for one another.
Lord,
You'd like to find us the strict demands of love so that we may find happiness by responding to them.
Lord,
You join a man and a woman together by their love for each other, so that in the family they establish, they may rejoice in children, the crown of their love.
Lord,
Through the offering of Christ, expose the church as his bride, and in his love offer it to you, holy and immaculate. In this you have given all the ideal of the love that should exist between husband and wife in the sacrament of marriage.
you call us to the meaning of life and love that binds Christian family together, mind and heart. Lord, now, one by one, couples come here, and eventually, it's another couple of waits behind that we don't have to wait too long for the following. And we come and kneel here. Lord God, this was the Lord. Most family of Providence and Bronze. Daniel, you see together. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and prayers. And what strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in respect to one another and share each other with sincere peace. So, that's this the Christ.
Amen.
Lord God, the source of the love, the was family of Providence, has brought thee and courage together. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage, and pray for your grace, grant that, strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. And as this, through Christ. Amen. And Lord God, this one of love. The West family of Providence is brought the Son and John together. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and prayer for the grace, grant thanks, strengthened by your blessing, and may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. As this, Christ our Lord. Lord God, this one shall forth of the Lord, the West family of Providence, and Bronze. Bless them Christina together. as they prepare themselves to sacrament of marriage, we prepare grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, and may grow in their respect for one another, and cherish each other as sincere love. We ask this through Christ. Amen. Lord God, is with all of our the West part of the province of God, union and God's together. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Lord God, who is one of our love, the most family of providence, is God's Letizia and Lord. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in their respect for one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Lord God, this was of our God, the wise family of providence is brought in mission and deal together. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Lord God, the souls of our God, the wise family of providence, the gods Sophia and Niels together, as they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Lord God, source of our love, the most family of providence, the God, we pray together, Lorenzo and Priscilla. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Lord God, the source of our love, the most family of providence is God's family of together. As they prepare themselves for the sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Lord God, before the first of all, the most family of providence has brought some Sophia and Andrea together. As they prepare themselves to sacrament of marriage and pray for their grace, grant that strengthened by your blessing, they may grow in the respect of one another, and cherish each other with sincere love. We ask this for Christ. Amen. We can stand and say together our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is sacrifice against. And it is not for the fish, but the liver of the covenant. May the God of love and peace abide in you. Guide your steps and confirm your hearts in his love, now and forever. Amen.